welcome to the Season 2 finale of Metrocasting. I'm Doug Farley. We begin with the tale of one man's source of pride and patriotism that stretches all the way back to the World War II years and the historic role that Berwick played in that global conflict. For many in the greater Berwick area, the American Car Foundry, or the ACF, was more than just a place to work. It was a way of life. It not only provided much-needed jobs, but also gave the borough a sense of purpose in that the rail cars, tanks, bulldozers, and other machines and items that they manufactured there were shipped and used around the world, especially during the World War II years. One of those ACF employees, Fred Shepperly, had the distinction of being part of and setting up the Marines' first ever tank division, which was comprised primarily of Berwick-made Stuart Light Tanks. Fred, who is now in his 80s, was an engineer at the ACF in 1942 when the Marines came calling.
I had a very unique job at ACF. They brought me in and they told me, we need a person that can be a go-between between the engineering, the plant production, the assembly lines, and the hardware that builds the tanks. They said, we would like you to be a spare parts man. They said, you're going to be appointed to work under a gentleman. His name is Mr. George Bradfield. He put me in his office, his own private office, and he says, now, Fred, what's happening here is the Army has come to us, and we're selling and delivering tanks. And a tank breaks down, and they don't have any parts to repair it. And he said the Ordnance Department wants ACF to supply parts immediately off the line or wherever we can get them. And these parts are to be shipped from Berwick direct to the arsenal or to wherever a tank is broken down. So I was assigned to the spare parts. We formed a big spare parts department, and we had boards all around the room with the part numbers and the name of the part, you know, and how many we were shipping and all this. We run a control center. So I was at that key point in my career when the Marine Corps came, and they said the Marine Corps is going to be getting tanks, and we're going to form tank companies. Now, prior to that time, all the Marine Corps had was a 75mm pack howitzer, which they took the wheels off and the barrel, and the guy's hand carried it to the fight, set it up, and fired it, you know. Now they were going to get light tanks. So they said, we're very interested at ACF here. If you have any people that could be key people that could assist the Marine Corps in the service, the supply, and the forming of tank companies, we'd be very interested in them, and we would actually offer them commissions.
Because of that offer, Fred was coaxed into joining the Marines, where they put him to work first for 8 months in the Marine Corps Commandant's office in Washington, D.C. as an ordnance officer, where he requisitioned tanks, ammunition, and other items for Marine locations around the world. He was then ordered to recruit 100 men as part of a special supply group, and all were shipped to the Pacific Theater.
One day they said, we need you in the field, and we're sending you to San Francisco. I came home, I married Lois, we went to San Francisco on the Challenger, 4 days. We arrived in San Francisco, and all these guys that I had recruited, about 100 guys from Berwick here, they're enlisted in all them, they're on them orders that you have there, all their names, Joe Nespoli and Mike Romeo, and a lot of people that are well known around here, and came back and were wonderful people in this town. They were great people. And I honor every one of them today, and thank the Lord I never lost a man. So I went to San Francisco, and 2 months later, they said, there's a boat in the harbor, get on it. So we arrived 30 days in Wellington, New Zealand. So I was there about 6 months, and we received tanks and tanks and tanks there from the United States. And what we did there, and some of the pictures show, we took the tanks and we run them up in the valley, and we had a service shed up there, and we serviced these tanks. And then we issued it to the marine companies in the division. And of course, when I got there, Guadalcanal was still going on, and we issued tanks to Guadalcanal, and the tanks really are the thing that finished off the Japs in the Guadalcanal. You never knew where they were, you know. And then I went to the Russell Islands. And the Russell Islands are about 60 miles north of Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands. And the ships came in there day and night, and we unloaded them, and we hid them in the trees and covered them with camouflage canvas. And then they were loaded on these tank ships, what do you call them? LSTs. And they were assigned right to the Marine Corps divisions. And of course they hit Saipan and Peleliu and all them places.
In all, Fred estimates around 500 or so Stuart Light Tanks were used in the South Pacific. So the question has to be raised, why were the Berwick tanks in such high demand?
A lot of those islands over there had coral reefs, and medium tanks couldn't ford the water like the light tanks could. And we lost a lot of tanks right down in the water. When an LST grounded, they grounded against these coral reefs, and when they dropped the bow and you went out with a tank, you just dropped in the water, you know. And the light tanks were maneuverable, and there was many of them, so that they could be around everywhere. And we issued them finally up to Guam and on up through the islands there. Then our site became a site whereby after each operation, these ships would bring all these tanks back that had been mutilated one way or another, disabled. And so we piled them up there, and we got directives from the United States that you got to save every vehicle because we have no idea how many we're going to need. So this meant that my crews were busy day and night repairing, putting new engines in them, putting new transmissions in them, and getting them serviced even after they had already saw a campaign, you know. So this was an ongoing for months from one island to the other, bringing them back and servicing them. But the bigger part that came on was the amphibian tractors. We got shipload after shipload of them, and we unloaded them in the ocean and drove them ashore, you know. And we had at least several thousand of those that were issued to the troops in the landings up through one island to the other. And then they brought them back, and we had to try and salvage some of them. And if you look at them, you see the tracks are completely, the treads are completely torn off from hitting that coral beach and going out, coming back in, going out, coming back in, and bringing all these soldiers or Marines and what have you ashore.
After the war, Fred and his Berwick troops returned home. Fred went back to work at the ACF and eventually became the engineering manager estimator. He says his job was primarily to come up with the pricing of new railroad cars, which is what the ACF is best known for manufacturing.
The estimating job was you took a picture, you took a picture and you detailed all the steel off of it. Then you took another, they're drawings, you know, there's a drawing there and shows the underframe. You detail all the cross members, the center sills, the side sills, and you say how much steel by weight goes into them parts. And then there's a material man over here, and he's the shop man that has the punch and shear, and he figures out this big sheet of steel, how many pieces he can get out to make a certain part for the underframe. And then the side frame was the same way. And then the roof, you had purlins, and you detailed all them parts in the amount of material that you felt it would take, and so much a pound. Or I would give the detail, the wheels, the axles, center plates, the couplers, I would give them to the purchasing department. The purchasing department would give me a price from 1 or 2 or 3 vendors that manufactured, somebody that made steel wheels, you know. So I'd get a price from Bethlehem Steel for a wheel for so much money, and I would pick the best price and I'd put it in the estimate. And then I would get the truck completely priced. I would get the body completely priced. So many windows you needed at a certain size that somebody made the sash, somebody that made the seats, somebody made the air conditioning, and all these, and all the electrical. There was like 21,000 feet of electrical cable went into a New York City subway car. And that's how I come up with the full estimate with the labor man and the engineering department of, say, $120,000 is the plant cost of a New York City subway car. In 75 years, they probably made upwards of $50,000 in all those years, because they got the contract every year. Nobody else was bidding against them. Till one time the world fell in and everybody was bidding, you know. Now, I don't even know today, I haven't followed the subway cars. I don't even know who's building the New York City subway cars today. But in my time, every car that went down the tracks, when you went in there on the motorman's cab, it said this car is built by American Car Foundry, Berwick, PA. There was a plaque in every car. Those cars are probably long gone now. This is 60 years ago.
The ACF plant in Berwick was closed in the mid-60s after contracts for new New York City subway cars was given to another manufacturer, as Fred alluded to. Now, in telling his story, Fred did ask us that it be presented as a tribute to the Berwick ACF workers who built these Stuart tanks and other items that were used in Africa, Italy, France, Germany, and the Pacific Islands during World War II to help win the war. We thank you, and we salute you. There's an old adage that says a man's life can be measured by the quality of his work. Well, that is certainly true for Fred, as well as all of the men and women who worked at the American Car Foundry over the years in Berwick.